Good morning, dear students. Yesterday, that is, in my second lecture, I discussed about the differences between environmental studies and environmental science. We also came to know the definition of the environmental studies, why the subject environmental studies is a multidisciplinary subject. We also studied the difference between these two important fields with the help of an example. Today, we are supposed to discuss the scope of the environmental studies. So first of all, we must know what is the scope. What is the literal meaning of the scope of the term which we use, which has been used in this discussion. So basically, when we talk about scope, the literal meaning of the scope is the areas of the studies of the environmental subject. Means what are the different areas of the studies of the subject environmental studies. हिंदी में इसको हम कहते हैं विषय क्षेत्र, फैलाव, सीमा, कार्य क्षेत्र। तो स्कोप का जो लिटरल मीनिंग है वो है विषय क्षेत्र, यानी वो कौन कौन से क्षेत्र हैं जहां पे हम ये पर्यावरण अध्ययन करते हैं। इस विषय की सीमाएं कहां कहां तक हैं, इसका फैलाव कहां कहां तक है, इसकी व्यापकता कहां कहां तक है। सो स्कोप मीन्स दिस. So when we talk about the scope of the environmental studies, so this subject has a very wide scope in different areas. So we will discuss sequence by sequence the different areas where we study this subject. Okay, that is the scope of environmental studies. So let's discuss what are different scope of the subject environmental studies. So first important subject scope of the subject is the study of environment and ecology. Okay, so study of environment and ecology, this is the first scope of environmental studies. So under this scope, or we can say under this topic, we study what is the environment and what is the ecology. So we will discuss what is the environment, but let me tell you, the environment is the surrounding of an organism, as well as the ecology is the study of relationship of living beings with physical environment. So under the subject environmental studies, we will study the environment, different aspects of the environment, as well as the ecology. Okay, in nutshell, we can say the study of environment and ecology comes under environmental studies. Okay, this is the first important scope of the subject. Second important scope of the subject is the study of various components of the environment. Okay, when we talk about the study of various components of the environment, it means you know that the environment consists of different parts. Okay, broadly we can say that environment consists of biotic and abiotic components, and these components, we will study about these components under the subject environmental studies. And components of the ecology also. Okay, so ecology, there are different sub branches of the ecology. So under the subject ecology, we will study the different components of the ecology also. We will discuss this subject later. So this is the second important scope of the environmental studies, that is the study of various components of the environment as well as various components of the ecology. So this was the second important scope of the subject environmental studies. The third important scope of the subject environmental studies is the study of functional relationship of the different components of the environment and ecology with each other. That is, what is the functional relationship of different components of the environment and ecology with each other. That is how the environment and ecology are interconnected with each other, how they resemble with each other, how they interact with each other, we will study under the subject environmental studies. So this is the third important scope of the subject environmental studies. That is the functional relationship of the components of the environment and ecology with each other. Okay. So the fourth important scope of the subject environmental studies is the study of natural ecosystems. We know that our earth consists of different types of ecosystem. Okay, the living part of the earth is biosphere, and biosphere consists of different types of ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystems, aquatic ecosystems. So we will study the different ecosystems under the subject environmental studies. So this is the fourth important scope of the environmental studies. Fifth important scope is the study of interactions between human being and the environment. How human beings interact with the environment. So these interactions we will study under the subject environmental studies. Okay, this was the sixth important scope of the environmental studies. Seventh scope of the environmental studies is the study of regional variation of environmental components and their impacts on ecology. Okay, this means that you should know that the environmental conditions vary place to place. Okay, so everywhere the environmental conditions are not the very same, they differs. So what are the impacts of different environmental conditions on living beings as well as on the ecology? These relationships, or you can say these aspects, we will study under the subject environmental studies. So study of regional variation of environmental conditions as well as environmental components and their impact on ecology will be addressed by the subject environmental studies. After that, we will study the development of life, habitat, and society in major ecosystems. We discussed that Earth consists of different types of ecosystems. So in these ecosystems, how life gets developed, how habitats develop, and how society, how within a society the life develops. So we will discuss these aspects under the subject environmental studies. Okay. After that, we will study the economic activities of human beings like agriculture, industry, business, etc., and their impacts on the natural environment. Means whatever activities are performed by human beings, what will be the impact of these activities on the environment? These activities, again, I am saying, these are the agriculture, industry, business. So what will be the impact of agriculture, industry, business on the natural ecosystems as well as on the environment? We will study these impacts under the subject environmental studies. Means how man-made activities are going to impact the environment. So this is the very important scope of the subject. After that, when we come the next scope of the subject, it is the study of the relationship between environment and health. We must know that if our environment is neat and clean, then healthy life will prevail. And if the environment is not very clean, if it is polluted, its impact will be there on the human health. So what is the relationship between environment and human health? This is another important scope of the subject environmental studies. So under the subject environmental studies, we will study the relationship between environment and health. After that, the next scope is the study of regional environmental problems and measures to solve them. We know that because of the anthropogenic activities, different types of environmental problems have been created, and these environmental problems, you can understand that they affect human life, they affects our environment. So how we can sort out these environmental problems? So we will study these aspects under the subject environmental studies. Regional environmental problems, that if any problem related to environment in any particular region. For example, in our country, the fluoride problem is there in North India and South India. Okay, so such type of problems are existing in our country and in several other parts of the country, as well as if we discuss them, if we take into, you can say, at a very broader scale. So every country has certain environmental problems. How we can sort out these problems? So we will study these solutions of different regional environmental problems under the subject environmental studies. Now come to the next scope, that is the study of natural calamities like earthquake, floods, drought, famine, volcano, cyclonic disturbances. So study of natural calamities will be covered under the subject environmental studies. So we will study the causes, impacts, mitigation of different types of calamities like earthquake, flood, drought, famine, volcano, cyclonic disturbances, etc. So this is the another important scope of the subject environmental studies. After that, the next important scope is the study of the use of natural resources on the environment and the study of resource conservation. That is the use of natural resources in the interest of human welfare as well as their conservation. Okay, so natural resource utilization as well as their conservation, this will be covered under the subject environmental study, and it is the very important scope of the subject environmental study. After that, next important scope is the study of the level and impact of environmental degradation in different areas. We have discussed that because of the anthropogenic activities, the local environment has been affected adversely. Okay, so to which extent the environment has been degraded because of the human activities, these issues will be covered under the subject environmental studies. We will study the extent of damage to our environment because of the man-made activities under the subject environmental studies. After that, next important scope is study of the effects of population, urbanization, and industrialization on environment and ecosystem. That is, we know that population, overpopulation, urbanization, and industrialization, these activities have a profound impact on environment and natural ecosystem. So what type of impacts will be there because of the overpopulation, because of the urbanization, and because of the industrialization on our environment and ecosystem? Such type of impacts will be studied under the subject environmental studies. After that, next important scope is study of environmental impact of developmental activities. You know that we as a nation, we as a state, we as a district perform different types of developmental activities, just like dam building, road construction, uh, construction of flyovers. Okay, so construction of airports. So when we construct anything, okay, so what will be the impacts of these construction activities on local environment? So these impacts will be studied under the subject environmental studies. After that, we will study the environmental management. Okay, the study of environmental management is the another important scope of the subject environmental studies. After that, we will study the role of different individuals and societies in resource conservation and prevention of environmental pollution. So we know that in every society, there have been some individuals who have contributed immensely in the conservation of the environment as well as for the prevention of the pollution as well. So what are the different individuals who what they have done in order to conserve the environment as well as to prevent pollution, we will study under the subject. We will study different types of individuals, different people who have contributed immensely for the conservation of the environment as well as for the prevention of pollution. Okay, we will study different personalities, okay, under the subject environmental studies. After that, another important scope is to develop environmental awareness. This is the very important element of the environmental studies. And you know that if we want to keep the environment neat and clean, if we want to protect our environment, a sense of environmental awareness is of it is very important. If you are aware, then you will not damage, you will not pollute your environment. If you are not aware about the environmental protection, then this may pollute, this may damage our environment. So creating awareness among the people for environmental conservation, it is the another important scope of the subject environmental studies. Means under this subject, a person, if we study environmental studies, we will become aware regarding conservation of the environment. After that, the very last scope of the subject environmental studies is to formulate, interpret, and comply with the different environmental laws which have been promulgated, which have been legislated for the purpose of environmental protection. Okay, so to know, to formulate, to interpret, to comply with different environmental laws which have been enacted for the environmental conservation in our country, this is the another very important scope of the subject environmental studies. So we have discussed today the different scope of the subject environmental studies. So I am going to brief the scopes which we have discussed. So the first was the study of environment and ecology. Second was study of various components of the environment and ecology. Third was the study of the functional relationship of the components of the environment and ecology. Fourth was the study of natural ecosystems. Fifth was the study of interactions between humans and the environment. The seventh was the study of regional variation of environmental components and their impacts on ecology. Eighth was study of the development of life, habitat, and society in major ecosystems. Next was the ninth was the study of economic activities of human beings, that is impacts of agriculture, industry, business, etc. On the environment. 10th scope was the study of the relationship between environment and health. 11th was the study of regional environmental problems and measures to solve them. 12th was the study of natural calamities like earthquake, flood, drought, famine, volcano, cyclonic disturbances, etc. 13th was the study of the use of the natural resources as well as their conservation. 14th was the study of the level and impact of environmental degradation in different areas. 15th was the study of the effects of the population, urbanization, and industrialization on the environment and natural ecosystems. 16th scope was the study of environmental impact of developmental activities like dam building, road construction, flyover construction, etc. And the very last, the 17th scope of the subject environmental study was the study of environmental management. Sorry, after there is another important 17th, the study of the role of individuals and society in resource conservation and prevention of environmental pollution. This was the 17th scope. And 18th scope was to develop the environmental awareness. And the last one was to formulate, interpret, and comply with the laws related to environmental protection. So these are the different scopes of the subject environmental studies. Hope you would have got a strong sense about the scope of the subject environmental studies. Okay, so this is all for today's discussion. We will cover next aspect in our future lectures. Thank you.